Is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everybody and good afternoon. Welcome to the HP Dementia Webinar. It's Wednesday the 3rd of June and this is the third in our series of afternoon webinars. My name's Wendy Chambers and today, along with Elaine Hunter, we are your background organisers today. We are joined by a panel of speakers. Today we've got Jan Beattie from Scottish Government, and Jan's an HP Primary Care Advisor. She's going to introduce our topic today. And then Jan will pass to Claire and Lynn. Claire Craig is a physiotherapist in NHS Ayrshire and Arran, and Lynn Flanagan's from Health Improvement Scotland. As an audience today, we've currently got over 100 people online. There's about 250 people registered. It's a very interesting topic, obviously, which is brilliant. We really want to hear from you, our audience, and your way to put your thoughts or your questions to the panelists today is if you move your mouse at the moment on your computer screen or move your finger on your iPad, you'll see some little icons pop up. There will be a speech bubble with a question mark. And if you click on that, you can put your questions to our panelists. Elaine is then going to go through the questions and answers at the end part of our session. So the last thing I want to let you know is that our session is being recorded and you will receive an email with the link to that recording after the webinar. So I'm going to pass you over to Jan Beattie.
Thanks very much, Wendy. I'm absolutely delighted to be part of this webinar series this week, and I've heard an awful lot of positive chats about what's gone on so far. It's been really active on Twitter, and I've had a number of emails from people saying how good it's been and how informative and interactive. So I'm sure today's will be exactly the same. Obviously, we're aware of the importance of physical activity for everyone at any time, really, and the impact on our health and well-being, but particularly at the moment around the COVID-19 epidemic we have. So we're all a little bit less active, and the importance of physical activity is more vital than anything. And I'm sure Lynn and Claire are going to take through a lot of different ideas and suggestions and give yourself some more detailed information. I mean, this is a great opportunity for everyone, not just HPs, to stay connected and stay supported, for people supporting people with dementia across the whole of Scotland. So I'm not going to chat for very long, but I'm going to stay online and I'm going to follow all the questions as we go through. So I'm really interested to hear what everybody's thoughts are, what your any challenges you're having, and any really good stories or ideas of what's happening. So I'm going to hand over to Lynn and Claire and enjoy the webinar.
Thanks, Jan. Good afternoon, everyone. As Wendy said, my name is Lynn Flanagan, and I'm an improvement advisor in the Focus on Dementia team in Healthcare Improvement Scotland. But currently, I've been supporting Alzheimer's Scotland's COVID-19 resilience work during the pandemic. I'm also a very proud physiotherapist, and I'll be presenting today's webinar on physical activity with Claire Craig. Claire, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Claire Craig. I'm a physiotherapist in NHS Ayrshire and Arran, and I've been working in mental health for about 12 years. I'm currently the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy rep on the National Dementia AHP Dementia Group, and I'm also very proud to have completed the Dementia Specialist Improvement Leads course through NES, and at the moment I am the only physiotherapist in Scotland to have that, so it's really exciting, and I'm really pleased to be here with Lynn. It's a fantastic opportunity for us to share some of the things that we've been thinking about over the last few while.
Thanks, Claire. And before we begin the webinar, we would really like to find out about you and who you are. So what we're going to do is do a wee poll to find out who's joined us today. So Wendy's going to do that for us, and Claire's going to tell us who you all are.
So the poll's running just now, Lynn. I'm just letting you know that because Lynn can't see the poll.
and that's the results of the poll in. So we've got a lot of allied health professionals in the room. We've got 73% of the people online are allied health professionals. We've also got some third and independent sector workers and some health and social care workers, and also some people with people supporting people with dementia. So it's great to see the range of people that are here today, and we welcome you all.
Great, that's great news, and thank you everyone for joining, and I hope you do enjoy this session. So today's session will cover what physical activity actually is, what the benefits are. We'll talk a little bit about physical inactivity and sedentary behaviour, the impact of COVID-19 on physical activity levels for all of us, and also the impact of living with impact on people living with dementia and their carers. We'll also cover some hints and tips about keeping physically active, and we'll share some useful resources which hopefully you'll find helpful during this time. So before we begin the presentation, we would like you to reflect on what your activity levels have been over the last 10 weeks. So we're going to conduct another poll, and so we would like you to think about, over the last 10 weeks or so, have you been more physically active than before? Just about the same but participating in different activities, or have you been less physically active?
So just letting Lynn know again, we're running the poll just now and people are currently placing their bets.
Okay.
Fantastic, and that's the results of the poll coming again. People have got a range, have actually given a range of answers here. The highest percentage of people, 30% of people, are saying they've been less physically active than before. 27% of people have actually said they're more physically active than before. 22% have said just about the same but doing different activities, and 21% have said just about the same. So there's quite a range of responses there, and that just shows that we're all very different.
Yeah, and we expected to see that. We expect to see quite a mixed bag about how people have managed with their physical activity over the last 10 weeks. And I thought I would use my family to illustrate that. This motley crew are my family, and this photograph was taken just before the lockdown, so it's quite poignant to me because this is the last time that we were all in a room together. And so my brother-in-law is the chap on the far right, and he's a police officer, and he had been off work for a few weeks, so he had a bit more time. He didn't have his commute, so his physical activity levels had gone up. He'd been doing a lot more walking and running, so he'd been doing quite well. My sister, who's third on the right, she's still working, so her routines haven't changed that much. So her activity levels have been just about the same. My husband and I, my husband's second on the left there, our routines are quite different. We would normally go to the gym to be physically active, and so that we're not able to do that at the moment. So we're probably about the same, but we've had to really make a real conscious effort to try and be more physically active. I'm working from home more, I don't have my commute. So we're having to think outside the box and use apps and use different equipment around the house. So we're having to think differently. And my nephew's the second on the right there, and he's a teenager, and his physical activity levels have been much less. He's no school, he's got no PE, he would normally be going to basketball, he'd normally be out with his friends. He's spending quite a lot of time indoors gaming with the blinds shut, so I'm quite worried about his vitamin D levels, which we are quite worried about people over this period that aren't getting out and about. And in actual fact, for Mark, he's lost quite a bit of his muscle mass, because he hasn't been able to participate as much as he normally would. And then there's my mum and dad. My mum and dad are over 70, so for the last 10 weeks they haven't been going out. And again, it's that loss of routine, those everyday opportunities we would normally have to be physically active. So just going to the shops or going to church or you know, all these kind of day-to-day things that they would normally be participating in. And certainly that's something that we've been hearing from people living with dementia as well. It's maybe not getting to daycare, or not getting to the shops, or not getting to church, that people have been finding have been impacting their ability to be physically active. And the likes of my mum's got arthritis in her knees, and I've really seen her mobility deteriorate a bit over the last 10 weeks or so. So what you might find is people living with dementia, you know, you might find that their mobility and their functions deteriorating, not only because of the impact on their dementia, but also because of other conditions they might have. So for example, for arthritis, or if they've got Parkinson's or some other comorbid condition. And certainly that decline for a lot of people in their physical activity levels has been reflected in the data that we're seeing. So Fitbit reported that people's steps had gone down in March when this first started. And the University of College London conducted a study, and that was 47,000 people, so it's quite a big study. And worryingly, they found that 1 out of 4 people say that they have had no exercise or even gentle physical activity in the past 7 days. 85% of study participants reported they didn't engage in any moderate or strenuous exercise at all. And 40% of study participants reported that they had not done any gentle exercise at all, such as going for a walk. So that's quite worrying, isn't it? And the impact that that might have on people's general health and well-being. And in fact, that study showed that people with mental and physical health conditions were the least likely to be physically active. And it also showed that people from lower incomes were less physically active. So that's a bit of a worry for health inequalities as well. And again, going back to my earlier point, I think sometimes people have lost the routine, you know, they've lost some of the opportunities that they might have to be physically active. And certainly where I come from at first, that you saw a lot of people out walking, but that seems to have lessened a bit. And I wonder if people are maybe just struggling a little bit to kind of keep that momentum going. And Claire's certainly going to talk a little bit about motivation and how we can keep physical activity as part of our everyday routines in a little bit. So what do we mean when we say physical activity? Well, the World Health Organization defines it as any bodily movement produced by skeletal muscles that requires energy expenditure. And that includes activities undertaken while we're working, playing, carrying out household chores, travelling, and engaging in recreational pursuits. Sometimes people get a little bit mixed up with exercise and physical activity. Exercise is actually a subcategory of physical activity that tends to be planned, structured, repetitive, and it usually aims to improve or maintain one or more components of physical fitness. So for example, I might go for a run, improve my cardiovascular fitness. I might lift some weights to increase my strength. I might do some yoga to improve my flexibility and my balance. And so what are the benefits of physical activity? Well, there are many benefits of physical activity, and that includes reducing the risk of a whole range of conditions, including hypertension, coronary heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and various types of cancer. And physical activity can also help people manage these conditions, which is really important at the moment because we know some conditions actually put people more at risk of more serious complications of COVID-19. So for example, hypertension and diabetes. We also know that physical activity can improve bone health and reduce the risk of falls. And being physically active outdoors also supports people to get more of their vitamin D, which again supports bone health, especially when it's sunny. And we've been quite lucky that it has been quite sunny over the past 10 weeks. In terms of falls, we know that people with dementia are more at risk of falls than people without dementia. So people with dementia are at 2 to 3 times greater risk of falls than people without dementia. So people living with dementia, probably 70 to 80% of people will fall annually. So being physically active and engaging in strength and balance exercise is really important to try and reduce that risk for people. Physical activity helps us maintain our energy balance. Sometimes the more you do, the more you feel like doing. and it helps control our weight. And I know that a lot of people have said that they felt they've put a little bit of weight on during this period, and again that might be due to less physical activity. And again, we know that obesity, you know, can lead to people to have more risk of serious complications of COVID-19. So there's something there about physical activity helping support us going through the COVID-19 pandemic. Physical activity improves muscular and cardiorespiratory fitness, which again is really important for our resilience, and it helps physical function and mobility, which is really important because that's what enables us to do things that we need to do and that we enjoy doing. And let's not forget the really important mental health benefits. Physical activity has been shown to improve mental well-being. It alleviates symptoms of stress, depression and anxiety, and let's face it, I think we all have felt or experienced some of these symptoms over the past 10 weeks. And there's talk of this mental ill health tsunami because of the impact of COVID. So you know, the benefits of physical activity, you know, shouldn't be forgotten. And they often say that if the benefits of physical activity were in a pill, we'd all be fighting over it, we'd all be wanting it. But sometimes people don't appreciate this or prioritise physical activity in their life, particularly when they're stressed and busy. And sometimes it is hard to keep motivated. And again, Claire's going to talk about that a little bit later on. But you know, there's a whole range of benefits to being physically active. And physical inactivity is pretty much the opposite. It's about basically not reaching the physical activity guidelines deemed to benefit public health. And the consequences of physical activity are very severe. So physical inactivity is the fourth leading cause of mortality worldwide. And we know that, you know, many people do struggle to meet the physical activity guidelines. So 1 in 4 people are not active enough. And I think surprisingly for me, 80% of the world's adolescent population are insufficiently physically active. So again, that younger generation coming through about trying to keep them physically active as well. Sedentary behaviour refers to a group of behaviours that occur whilst we're sitting or lying down. So it's typically activities that require very low energy expenditure. Now, don't get me wrong, it's sometimes really important to have a rest, and not all sitting and lying down is negative. However, if you're doing that for prolonged periods of time, it is associated with chronic disease morbidity, irrespective of whether you meet the physical activity guidelines. So that's quite important. So you might meet your physical activity guidelines, you're maybe active, but apart from that, you're very sedentary. So that would negate any benefit you get. And I guess I'm probably quite a good example of that just now, where, you know, I do try and be as physically active as I can and meet the physical activity guidelines. But apart from that, particularly because of my job and the changes that my lifestyle has seen since the pandemic, I'm spending a lot of time sitting, a lot of time sedentary. So again, I have to be quite conscious of getting up and moving around if I've perhaps been at my desk a lot during the day. And we know that older adults, you know, tend to be more sedentary, so it does increase with age. And although not all people with dementia are older, we do know that that most people living with dementia are in the older age group. And that sedentary behaviour does rise sharply from the age of 70. And some of the older adults are spending up to 10 hours or more, you know, in sedentary behaviour. But we know just by breaking up those periods of sedentary behaviour that we can see some benefits in people's physical function. So really, you don't want to be sitting any more than an hour at a time. You know, ideally breaking it up more often than that. Sedentary behaviour and physical activity in people living with dementia. We do know from the research that people living with dementia do tend to be more sedentary than older adults without dementia. And I've always wondered, you know, how much of the decline that we sometimes see in people's function and their mobility is actually due to physical inactivity rather than the progression of the disease itself. But there's lots of different reasons why people living with dementia might be more sedentary, and that might be due to the condition itself. So we know that people can experience changes in their gait pattern very early on in the condition. So particularly if people have particular types of dementia, such as Lewy body dementia or dementia with Parkinson's, it might be due to risk aversion. And sometimes that's very well-meaning staff, health and social care staff, or family members who are worried about that individual. So they might be worried the person falls or gets lost, so they start to encourage the person to restrict what they're doing. Certainly in my career, if I had a pound for every time someone said, sit down, you'll fall, I'd be a very rich woman. Again, very well-meaning, but we start to restrict what people are doing because we're worried that they may come to some sort of harm. And certainly there might be it might be that some people just lose their confidence. So people living with dementia sometimes say, I used to go to the golf, but I was worried I would forget people's names, or, I was worried I'd make a fool of myself, so I just don't go anymore. So people's social life and opportunities for physical activity might actually decline for different reasons. The other reason why people might be more sedentary is Rosenberg reported that the biggest barrier to people breaking up periods of inactivity was actually that people forget. So clearly, if you have a condition that impairs your memory, you're more likely to forget that you haven't been active, and you might find yourself sitting for more prolonged periods of time. And again, Claire's going to talk about some strategies that people living with dementia and people that support them can use to try and to remind people to break up their periods of sedentary behaviour. Personally, what I would love to see as part of everyone's post-diagnostic support, people being offered some sort of physical activity or exercise prescription, something where we can really chat to people about their physical activity and their physical activity opportunities. Now, this is the physical activity guidelines about how much we should actually be doing. And to be honest, I did hesitate about putting these guidelines up here today, which might seem strange given the fact that we're doing a webinar on physical activity. And the reason for that is that, I know that some people are really struggling just now. We're going through a global pandemic, and, I was on the helpline this morning and hearing some really harrowing stories about how people are just trying to get through this. So we haven't really been pushing the guidelines on social media or anything like that, because we didn't want people to feel that they're a failure if they're not meeting them, when people are just trying to get through the day. So I think for us it's more about supporting people and having that conversation about how perhaps people can be more physically active. But I have shared them today just for the purposes of this webinar. So we should all be aiming to do at least 150 minutes moderate activity throughout the week. But for the people that we support, to make it more manageable, we can break that into chunks. So you don't have to do it all at the one go. You can break it into like 10-minute chunks, and that all adds up over the course of the day. So that's well worth bearing in mind, so that people might find it a bit more achievable. We should also been doing some activities two or more days a week to strengthen our muscles. And this is important because as we age, after the age of 25, we do start to lose muscle mass. So by the time we've got to 80, we've lost about 30% of our muscle mass. So activities that strengthen your muscles helps negate that to a certain degree. And again, it doesn't have to be fancy. It can be quite simple activities that we can be doing with people. So it might be using your own body weight. So it might be simple as standing at the sink and doing some knee bends. It might be doing some sit to stands. It might be doing stairs and steps. For people's upper limbs, it might be something as simple as, doing little push-ups against the wall or a worktop. It might be using bottles of water or cans of food as light weights. So it doesn't have to be complicated or difficult. Older adults should also be doing activities that enhance their balance and prevent falls 2 or more times a week. And this is important because our risk of falls does increase as we get older. So 1 in 3 people over 65 will fall every year, and that increases to 1 in 2 when you're over 80. And as I mentioned earlier, people with dementia do have an even greater risk of falls. So again, it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be things like yoga or Tai Chi, but it can be things as simple as, you know, trying to stand on one leg when you're waiting the kettle boiling. You know, it can be things that are quite simple for people. And Claire's going to signpost you to some really, really useful resources that people can get some ideas about how they might do some of these activities and fit them in to their daily routine. And again, importantly, the physical activity guidelines say that we should be minimising our sedentary behaviour. So as I mentioned earlier, you could be doing all your physical activity, but if you're then, you know, if you're sitting for prolonged periods of time, then you almost outdo any benefit that you might have received. So our message is that, you know, I said earlier, we don't want people to feel bad or disheartened if at the moment during this pandemic that they're not managing to do an awful lot and they're just trying to get through the day. For us, it's about just having that conversation about physical activity, you know, looking for opportunities. So, you know, people aren't currently doing anything at all. It's about doing something and then perhaps doing that a little bit more often. And then, you know, that moving towards hopefully achieving or getting nearer to achieving the guidelines that promote good health. And the key messages are something's better than nothing, and it's never too late, and you can always build it up gradually. And that's something that I actually said to my own mum yesterday. She went out for a walk. She says it wasn't very much. I said, you know, but that's great. You know, you've done something. You can always build it up gradually. So I think that's the message that we are trying to put across just now, while people are perhaps going through a period of stress, and in actual fact, you know, I think you know, some of the benefits of physical activity, you know, are going to help prevent some of the stress and distress that we're seeing during this period. So just before I hand you over to Claire, I just wanted to again emphasise the importance of physical activity, exercise and rehabilitation during COVID-19. And it's not just for people directly affected by the virus, but for all individuals who perhaps haven't been able to access resources for non-COVID related conditions, and people that are perhaps shielding, who haven't been able to be as physically active as they normally would be. So I think that makes physical activity even more important going forward. So it would be amiss of us during this webinar on physical activity to have you sitting for a full hour. So before I pass you over to Claire, what I would like to do is stand up and have a stretch. And if everyone can just stand up out their chair, have a right good stretch. And if you want to have a power pose, anyone that knows me knows I love a good power pose there, like this person here's doing. And I'll pass you over to Claire, who'll carry on with the rest of the webinar.
Thank you very much, Lynn. I'll just give you all a few seconds to have that stretch and just acknowledge the feeling that it gives you when you stand up and you move, and just how that all feels. If you feel anything creaking or feel anything moving around, it's lovely to just have that few seconds within a meeting. So I'm here to talk a little bit about the impact of COVID-19 on people with dementia and carers. And Lynn alluded to some of this in her slides at the beginning of today's talk about, and your poll showed how differently that you've all responded to this, and how much has affected you in different ways. There are so many factors that may have influenced how active you've been over the past few months, and some of them are listed here. I'm going to focus on the factors highlighted here in yellow today, as these are some of the things that we have control over to change. And that's something we have to think about at times, is what do we have the control to change? And what are the things that are happening around us that we don't always have the control over to make a difference? But as Lynn discussed just before she handed over to me, one of the things has been that as people haven't had as much access to healthcare lately, as they may be a bit more fatigued, they may have other health issues going on, people may have become more deconditioned, have moved less as time's gone on. And also people may find that being isolated for so long has actually knocked their confidence to try new things, or that we've responded to being at home by sitting more often and for longer. Or that those of you, and sometimes that means that those around you may think that this is it, that nothing can stop the physical deterioration or the physical changes once they actually start. Yet every movement counts. Just 10 minutes of exercise per day can actually make us feel better, both physically and emotionally. And knowing it does not take much time to make a big difference is a really helpful motivator. Motivation to move is a huge factor at this time and at any time for us all, but particularly in people with dementia. Some people might have had more motivation in this time. They might well have had something they're aiming for, but for a lot of people, that motivation may have been a lot harder to find. And there's a lot of things that you can do to stay motivated. So we'll just move to the next slide. And these are just some of them. One of the things that I think about a lot is having fun. Laughter is often, as some people say, the best medicine. An activity and exercise which you're not enjoying or that bores you or you don't believe is going to help you is something that it's very hard to stick to. It's very hard to keep doing something that you don't believe is going to make any difference. So it's really important to keep that in your mind when you're choosing what activity to do and to make that part of your routine. And that's what we're moving on to here. Planning exercise into your daily routine can actually give you another motivation, a reason to move. Things will get in the way of that plan, and that's okay. But having the plan in the first place means that even if you miss it one day, you've got something to go back to, you've got something to keep going back to as a plan. You'll all have heard about the impact of music. There's so much evidence out there about the benefits of music for people with dementia. It brings back memories and it makes us all move. For example, if I just now started singing something like Agadoo, so if we think of the chorus and we go Agadoo, do, do, push pineapple, shake the tree, Agadoo, do, do, push pineapple, grind coffee, to the left, to the right, jump up and down into the knees, come and dance every night, sing the hula melody. What did you do? Did any of you do the actions? We used to do this, and some people, you automatically start to move, or if you know that music has a song or a rhythm attached to it, it's often a natural response to start doing actions, and even those small things can make a huge difference. Tracking your progress and setting goals can be a way of showing how you're getting on, and they are good motivators. And you'll know recently with Captain Tom, with the fundraising that's been done for various charities, I've seen so many people, for the little children who have been running up and down their gardens, to the older people who have been running up and down their stairs. There have been so many uplifting and empowering stories of people setting goals, of people setting targets and things for them that they've achieved and gone surpassed their own achievements. So that's something that can really come into play with all of this. Can we move on to the next slide? But one of the things that often comes up is about what happens when that doesn't work, when that motivation isn't there. We can feel really guilty about that, and actually people can feel really concerned or annoyed with themselves or others if they're not achieving a movement during a day. So it's important to give yourself self-compassion. It's important to actually be be good to yourself and realise that it's okay. It's okay to have a moment where you don't do something. If you've got a plan to do it and you're planning to keep doing things, having a moment where you don't feel so good is okay. And that's why I brought up on this slide about if at first you don't succeed. Because actually, we all have moments like this. We all have moments where things become difficult or the things we plan to do don't always happen. So don't worry about that. Stay calm. You may well have been unwell at some point during this time. And again, it's okay to rest. We just don't want you to do that for too long. Come back to it later. You might find that in the morning where you've planned to get up, you've planned to do your walk around the garden, that actually doesn't feel like the right time, or it's raining at that moment in time. And then the sun comes out later on and that gives you the motivation to go out and do something. So use everything around you, use your environment to encourage you to move. Stay positive is one of the most important things. Often having someone once said to me, having that positive outlook sets you up to succeed. If we go into something saying that we're not going to manage it or we're going to fail, then you might, or that might be what happens. So keeping positive and actually really believing that you're going to achieve something is really important. The flip side of all of this work about motivation is that some people have found lockdown to be a time to become more active, to do more. And this mirrors the poll we had at the start, and it mirrors the variation in people with dementia as well. Although many people's physical abilities and motivation change over time and deteriorate, others retain their drive to move, and for some this often increases. We often consider this drive to move, the reasons for it, to be down to stress or distress terms. Is this person trying to tell us something about how they feel? Is this person trying to tell us they're in pain? But we should also consider other factors behind this drive to move, particularly in people who may be physically frailer. Can we move on? Tom Kitwood in 1997 described the psychological needs of people living with dementia to be love, comfort, attachment, occupation, inclusion and identity. He arranged these into the Kitwood flower, which looks very like the forget-me-nots we're all sharing this Dementia Awareness Week. And if you've not already filled one in, coloured it in and taken photos of it to share, please do that. It's clear that many of these factors, as described by Kitwood, will be adversely affected by the social isolation aspect of COVID-19. But what is not immediately evident is how this links to physical activity and mobility. Yet often a person's identity is tied in with their ability to move. The way other people treat us reinforces what we believe about ourselves. So if we repeatedly tell a person they cannot do something, they will learn to believe that, reducing their personal confidence and potentially impacting, by de-skilling a person, and impacting their physical health and cognition. And that goes back to what Lynn said earlier about that. It's a normal reaction. People are trying to help, but often when we're trying to help, we can help by asking people not to move, and that can self-perpetuate, where people then become even less active as a result. So risk enablement and taking positive risks is something that is becoming talked about a lot more widely. There has been some great work in Scotland on this recently, and I know that there are resources that are due to be shared in time over this. But taking risks is a very considered approach, taking into account of how an activity will impact on a person's quality of life, what the risks are and how they can be reduced. We often focus on the negative aspects of taking a risk, but what if we could turn that on its head and tell people they can do things, that taking a risk may make things better, that being active will improve their quality of life. Sometimes we've got to turn things around in our own minds, change the way we think about things to actually look at how that impacts on people. The quote at the bottom here was from a recent document released by the Scottish Dementia alumni who went around Scotland speaking to their peers. And it was about self-management of dementia. What did that mean to people with dementia? What did that mean to people living with the condition and their carers? And many of the responses mentioned physical activity. They mentioned keeping fit. They mentioned going to the gym. They mentioned how important that was to them. And I think we have to keep that in mind as professionals when we're working with people with dementia and with each other, and thinking about how this comes about and about the recommendations that we make. But risk doesn't come without emotion. Taking risks can actually make us feel quite fearful or guilty. And having had this conversation, I wonder how you're feeling right now. Could we move on, Lynn?
Mm-hmm.
Are you feeling any of these emotions? We all change them depending on what's happening at the time. But often thinking of taking risks can make people feel quite fearful or worried or guilty. But actually there can be an excitement with it as well, or it can be something that gets people really, they want to do these things. However you're feeling, people with dementia will respond to your emotions. If you're worried or you're fearful, it's likely they will pick up on these emotions as well. So by staying sort of calm, clear, positive, upbeat, people are more likely to respond positively to what you're asking them to do. I'm going to pick up on some of the emotions that people have expressed to me over the time I've been working with people on risk enablement. You may have experienced these as well, as both a person with dementia, as a carer, or as a professional. Fear. Fear is something that gets discussed a lot. The fear of leaving someone, the fear of being alone, the fear that someone may fall. That is a big one, and certainly, as Lynn discussed earlier, people with dementia do have a higher risk of falling, and we get worried about that. And their fear of what may actually happen. We don't know what will happen, but we have a fear of the unknown, or a fear of what might happen. The same comes for guilt. Guilt that you cannot change the process, guilt that you cannot be with the person you love during lockdown, during these days of social isolation, guilt that someone's broken lockdown and gone for a walk outside, forgetting the rules. But again, if that's impacting on someone's quality of life and helping them to actually stay well, then we have to consider these things in conjunction with each other and not in isolation. Anger is often something else that's expressed. Anger that someone's not listening to me. Anger that instructions aren't being followed. Anger that people forget to do requested tasks. Again, something that's expressed quite a lot, and it's that remembering why that may happen. These are really common emotional responses, but often they make us feel very alone, and COVID-19 may have amplified some of these feelings. So what we have to think about is, what is this all about? Why are we thinking about these things? It's because they impact on what we do, how we move, how we keep going. And actually, we have to acknowledge this, acknowledge how all this makes us feel, so that we can move past that and actually really start to think about how we can keep moving and how we can keep doing things. So I've got a few suggestions here, and you've probably heard of some of them before. Next slide.
Mm-hmm.
Fabulous. Again, some of these you will have heard of. A lot of them come up time and again when we're talking about things that can help. But it's really important to reinforce these going forwards and what a difference they make. My light's going off. So, not sitting too long. Again, this was mentioned, it's something that is really important. I think advert breaks, when you're watching a television programme, getting up during the adverts for a stand and a stretch is a fantastic opportunity. It's a great motivator and a great kind of reminder to move. Trying to set those time limits so you're finding ways to move on a regular basis. It's very easy to sit in the same spot all night. I've done it, believe me, I've been there. But it's that reminder to myself to get up, to go and do something. Household chores are really important as well, and I think that's also part of occupation, and I'm sure our colleagues would discuss that as well. If people have a routine. If people have things that they would usually do, getting them to keep doing them for as long as possible is a really important part of staying active. So whether that's standing at the sink with support, helping dry the dishes or wash the dishes, or even just passing something to the next slide, those things can be really helpful. Getting outside, especially in this wonderful sunshine, I think there's been a fear from a lot of people to go outside with lockdown, with social isolation, with shielding. And sometimes it's remembering that that outside doesn't have to be far from your front door. That could literally be going to your front door and back. Or if you're in a flat, walking down the corridor and back. Sometimes just that change of scene and movement from the same room can make a difference. Walking, we all know it's something that can change with dementia. It's something that can get worse, but the more you practice and the more you keep doing it, the more important that is. And if you're having that difficulty with walking, certainly physiotherapists are available to really consider that and see if there's anything that they can do to help you to keep strength and keep moving for longer. Dancing is my pet project. That is my way of keeping fit, and I absolutely adore it. Anyone who knows me knows that that is the thing that keeps me going. And that's been really hard as part of this current situation. Being able to, I'm a partner dancer, probably like many people out there. I Lindy hop and various things like that. But there are opportunities. My husband and I have been making sure that we dance to one song on the radio in the kitchen while we're cooking dinner, so that we get some form of movement. It doesn't have to be big, it doesn't have to be long, just those moments that can actually make a difference. I'm not going to factor in on the other two. Playing, using technology, there are a multitude of apps out there, and some of the resources we have mentioned in our hints and tips sections at the end. But I want to focus on muscle strengthening and balance exercise. It's something that as physiotherapists we are really keen on promoting and showing how much of a difference these things can make. And on that note, I'm really proud to launch some new resources that have been developed by physiotherapists recently. So this is some of my colleagues in Greater Glasgow and Clyde. These are the group of mental health physiotherapists in Greater Glasgow and Clyde. And last year we were working with Elaine Hunter and Alzheimer's Scotland we were lucky enough to get some funding to develop some resources for people with dementia on strength and balance. So today we are really proud to launch the first two posters in this suite of resources. There will be more to come. We are looking to do some videos. We are looking to provide a pocket ideas booklet relating to physical activity ideas. So there is more to come. This is the start of a suite of resources. And they've also been endorsed by a professional body, the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy. So the Super 6 exercises. These exercises may be familiar to many of you. They've been very widely shared through the Active and Independent Living programme, through CSP resources, including Love Activity, and the Get Up and Go resources, which these have been adapted from. But what we realised when we read a lot of those resources, that the wording and the descriptions were actually quite difficult for people to understand, particularly people with dementia, with memory impairment, with sensory impairments. So we have adapted and redesigned these using the deep resources and guidelines for language and sensory impairment. They are colour contrasted, and the language has been designed to be intuitive and easy to follow. And you may note that the instructions are shorter than some of the other resources you might have seen. So to show how intuitive they should be, I just want you to have a try at exercise number 1, sit to stand. It's an exercise we advise a lot. It's something we do all the time. And I'm going to read the words exactly as they're written. So if you're able to, I just want you to sit back from your computer for 2 seconds. Are you ready? Okay. Number 1, sit to stand. Stand up. And sit down. Repeat 10 times. That's it. That's all we've got there. There are safety instructions at the top, but actually the body of the exercises is designed to be very easy to describe, to follow, and for carers or for people working with people with dementia or sensory impairment to actually explain. You don't have to explain, they should be self-explanatory to do. Secondary to that, we have also developed a seated fix for strength exercises. So this complements the exercises you've just been, and this will be a new resource for you. This is something that hasn't been as widely shared or widely developed. The exercises had been chosen by the physios in Greater Glasgow and Clyde for people who may not be able to do the Super 6 yet. It might be something they can use as a programme, as a development or as a step. They've been designed to work the core muscle groups of activity and have been trialled with people with dementia and their carers, and the feedback received has been overwhelmingly positive to date. So we are really excited to share these, and these resources will be coming out and hopefully will be shared very widely, including through the AHP section and Connecting People, Connected Support on the Alzheimer's Scotland website going forward. So I wanted to finish with a last poll, just to ask you all how you feel after today. How will you be active tonight? What's your plan? What's the thing that you're going to go home and do? Will you dance in your kitchen? Will you get out in your garden? Will you go and splash in the paddling pool? Although I'm not sure, the sun's gone away a bit tonight. Will you go for a walk, or will you do some strength and balance exercises? Fantastic. Over 70% of you are going for a walk, which is great. 20% of people have said they'll do some strength and balance exercises, and 10% are joining me for a dance in the kitchen. Only 1% of people have said they're going for a splash in the paddling pool. If the person who does that does it tonight, I want some photographs. Thank you for joining in. So we move on to some final thoughts as we come to the end of the hour. This hour's gone by very quickly. I just wanted to give you a few thoughts and some things to think about as we go away from this webinar today. You're never too old. You're never too old to do physical activity. People say that to me all the time. I'm too old, I can't do this anymore. But it's never too late. And that's a description that has been put out by a professional body, by the CSP. It's something that's good. And if you get the chance to go on YouTube and look up the video related to Never Too Late, it's worth a view. You can do more than you think. Every movement counts. Take calculated risks. Have a think about these risks and say, can you do them? But the most important thing for me to do when you're doing activity or exercise is to enjoy yourself. We really want to promote what you can do, and that's something we've been developing through Connecting People, Connecting Support with the With Physiotherapy You Can and the other AHP You Can cards. So remind yourself of that and remember that as we go forward. There are some useful resources on the next slide that we'll also share with you going forward, and I'm sure this will be available afterwards, including some links to some online resources, some online exercise groups that are currently happening, including Make Movement Your Mission, which is 10-minute exercise clips 3 times a day that people can join in with live, and including a variety of resources there to keep going. So I would say thank you for this today, for listening to us and for hearing some of these resources, and to ask if there's any questions, although I know we're coming to the end of their time today.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Claire and Lynn. I'm going to pass over to Elaine. Elaine, do you have any questions that have come in? We've had a few come in, ladies.
We've got quite a few, and what some of people are asking for as well. So some people are sharing some other great examples as well from Pasna, Ellie, and Anne Marie. So we'll put them into a blog and find a way to share them and do a question and answer. And somebody's asking if the new stretch exercises will be shared, and yes, they will. So we'll do that as well. So there's quite a few questions. So I was just going to give you a couple because of the time, and we can do it a question and answer, and we can share it out widely. One of the things for either of you, but I thought maybe Claire, because you're Agadoo singing. So Suzanne was saying that they do a get up and dance session in their care home every Friday. And is there a playlist that they could explore really to support that? What would you recommend? Oh, I can't hear you, Claire.
I certainly have. I certainly have certain. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Is that it? Yep.
Yep.
Brilliant. I've definitely got some examples of things that I use a lot that encourage movement. Agadoo is actually surprisingly good. People do move to that, and they often know the actions. I have gone very silly at times and used the Birdie song because again people remember it. Saturday Night Fever is a fantastic dance because again we know all the moves to that. Any Scottish music often gets people doing a bit of the Highland fling, so that can bring the arms up and get people going. It's certainly something I can have a think about. I've got a few that I always keep on my playlist, so I'm sure I can share that at some point as well.
Brilliant. And then one for Claire and Lynn from Morag. Again, it's from a care home, and they're just really describing somebody who's very great to work with and lovable, 85, really active before, but now is quite stubborn. And what advice would you give somebody to persuade them to move?
Do you want to go first, Claire, or will I go first?
On you go, Lynn.
Yeah, I think for me it's getting to know someone really well and getting to know their likes and dislikes, and I think that's half the battle, you know, really getting to know someone. So what floats one person's boat won't float another. So maybe trying to find out what the person's hobbies are and what, and you know, if it's sport, if it's you know, is it gardening, you know, what were they previously, what activities have someone previously liked, is always a lot more enjoyable for people, I think. So I think that would be the key tip for me, really.
And Claire?
I think that makes a lot of sense. I would always try something quite intuitive, something you don't have to think about. One of the things I quite often do is get out a balloon and just start throwing that around the room. I know that if I'm in a room and a balloon gets thrown about, you can't help but put your hand up and bat it away. It becomes something you do without thinking. So sometimes doing very intuitive movements or things that you don't have to think about can make a difference.
Yeah, and I think if you mentioned the word exercise, sometimes people will want to run for the hills. So, you know, like that, if it's intuitive, it's something that's functional, if it's something that's fun, people are more likely to participate, you know, without putting so much thought into it.
That's great, thank you. There are other questions around sort of shielding, your tips to reduce falls, and sort of just keeping people mobile. But I think because of time, what we could do is do a question and answer, and we can find a different way to share them. But there was lots of interest and different questions, and other people sharing good examples as well. Is that okay, Wendy?
Yeah, that's super. I think we are coming to the end of our time today, so thank you to all the audience, and we will ensure that we answer those questions in a question and answer blog, and we'll circulate that widely. I would like to thank all the audience for joining us today, and on your behalf as an audience, I would like to thank our guest speakers, so to Jan Beattie from Scottish Government for joining us, and also to Lynn and to Claire for taking time to share your work and your thoughts with us today. So the webinar has been recorded, and you will receive an email link to that in the day after the webinar. But before you leave today as an audience, we would love to hear from you again. And in a moment, you'll have a screen which will give you an opportunity to share your thoughts about today's webinar session, and also to tell us a bit more about something that maybe you're planning on going away and trying out now, following listening to the webinar and hearing about the resources today. So without further ado, I would like to say please join us through, we've got 2 more webinars this week. Tomorrow's topic is about a simple newspaper initiative that's helped people stay engaged and reduce social isolation for people. It's been a real simple idea that's worked very well. So that's tomorrow. And other than that, I'll say good evening. Have a lovely evening. Enjoy your physical activity, your walks, your splashes in the pool, your dances in the kitchen. And we hope we hear from you again. So goodbye from us.
Bye.